I actually initially got into all of this because I was writing about the future of government and particularly how young people were going to be working in government and how technology was going to affect the development and implementation of public policy. So started to think a lot about how open source methodologies might apply to government, and it didn't take that long for you to start thinking about the data that was being used. And then in 2009, I think, the mayor of Vancouver got elected and I was kind of connected to his team, so me and a few other people where I kind of asked what would you do on the technology front, and me and another guy suggested you should do open data. And that led to Vancouver, I think, having the second municipal open data portal in the world after Washington, D.C. For me, the reasons to do open data were always kind of twofold. One was, let's find ways to empower communities, whether those were for-profit entities that could make use of it, or I'm always particularly interested, the nonprofit sector could make use of this information to deliver services more effectively. And the other side was, how do we get governments to actually share data more effectively? One of the reasons I really got in the space is I had a friend who worked for the federal government in Canada, and he told me he had a summer intern whose only job for like 3 weeks was to go and find data from the Stats Canada website that they knew existed, but nobody could ever find. And I was like, there's just an enormous efficiency of just getting governments to share more effectively. And that for me is kind of like the real promise, is actually getting governments to work more effectively, just internally, that I feel we're just now starting to realize. The short answer is it is insufficient on its own. It's not just, is the data available? It's, is it available in a way that people can understand at the point and the moment when they're making the decision that's going to be relevant. I was very involved with getting Yelp to use restaurant inspection data. And I think that's a wonderful example of like when people have the information, I think that can move the needle. There's definitely evidence that shows us that when people have information, they'll make better choices. But it's often not the raw data, it's actually the data available in a consumable way in the place where they are doing the task that's going to be impacted by it. I want us to be cautious about talking about what open data will do and to kind of make too many assumptions, because I think often the focus is on the positive. But I frequently give a talk about the opposite impact of data being available. And one of the big examples I use is the congressional district in Chicago that is this tiny little sliver that works its way around the city in this giant U. And the only way that you can construct a congressional district like that is if you have data available that indicates to you where you think likely Republican voters are and Democrat voters are, so you can gerrymander the system. So there's still an enormous responsibility that comes from society when this stuff gets made available to figuring out how we can get motivated politically to still fight the things that we don't like. And I want the data to be there to foster all of that, but let's just not presume that it's going to all turn out to be happy, fun things that we all like. I'm working right now as a mediator between a group of environmentalists and a group in a natural resource industry over how to manage a resource in an environmentally sustainable way. And one of the things that I love is that basically all of the negotiations all take place around maps, where people are opening up maps and they're looking where the extraction's taking place and what are the natural assets that are being overlaid over it, what are the ones that really need to be preserving, what are the core metrics we should be using to measure success in preservation of those natural resources. And not all of the data, but a huge amount of that data actually is public data. If they get the negotiations right, it has billions of dollars in value on stock valuations. It has huge meaning for the sustainability of natural resources and kind of like the beauty of the country and of the countryside. But it's a conversation that's never going to be public. And no one's going to know that it's going on. And no one's going to realize that open data played not the crucial, but a necessary element in this negotiation. That's what success actually looks like, I think, in like 95% of the cases, and we're never going to hear about it. It's never going to be the thing that was like, oh, open data made it all possible. No, it's like buried deep, deep down in the stack. But that is an amazing outcome. For me, open data is a MacGuffin device. It's actually a tool that everybody says they care about, but we use it to drive a whole bunch of other changes that make government both more accountable to people and more open, but also drives a whole bunch of internal change that makes it more effective and leads to the conversations I was talking about with the environmental groups and the natural resources industries having those conversations. The fact that then the data can be made available to the public when privacy and other issues are taken into account is a side benefit of a good internal practice that they should just be doing anyways, because that will make for a better and more efficient and more effective government. This for me is like, that's the kind of the advice I think politicians need to hear, because right now what they're hearing is this is a transparency initiative. And the moment something gets made a transparency initiative, it's very, very hard for people to see what their ROI on that is. It's very hard to measure the impact. Often the impact is governments being made look bad, not good. So let's not sell it that way. Let's sell it as a transformation of government that actually also happens to have the benefit of making government more transparent.